Hello everyone, and welcome to tonight's episode of BonAppeGeek, a show where a bunch of us nerdy... Wait, sorry. Wrong show. Not a DM. Hello, and welcome to BonAppeGeek, a fun twist on a cooking show where three geeky friends come together to bring our favorite fandoms to life by whipping up tasty dishes in our home kitchen based on and inspired by our favorite games, shows, movies, and more, this time with a holiday twist. I'm Rach.
I'm Nora.
I'm Fresh Cut Grass.
Yes.
If I don't get to be Matt Mercer, you don't get to be Fresh Cut Grass. We are three geeks who play with our food. Welcome back. Previously on BonAppeGeek, our band of brave adventurous...
We're not playing D&D today.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay. All right. Well then, welcome back to BonAppeGeek for our fourth episode and our very first episode of 2022.
That's crazy. It feels like just yesterday. It was 2021.
Indeed, it does. So we're here to bring you a very festive, special pajama brunch all about Critical Role, a show that absolutely all of us love. I've been following since Campaign 1, although I never got fully caught up with it. I'm embarrassed to admit.
Well, then I'm really embarrassed. I didn't even hear about it until lockdown, and we started playing D&D ourselves. And I tried to watch Campaign 2. I felt overwhelmed, so when Campaign 3 started, I jumped on board.
Yeah, I've watched, I loved Campaign 2, I loved Jester, she was fantastic. I loved the little mini campaign in between, Exandria Unlimited, and it was weird because, like, I fell in love with some characters there, particularly Fern. I was, like, sad to see her go, and then here we are with Campaign 3.
And Abria did an amazing job.
Abria was fantastic, she was. I really enjoyed having her DM. But Campaign 3 has been going for a little while now. I think we are 7 episodes in at this point.
Sorry, Mister was acting up.
That Mister. Oh, look, the house is on fire.
Oh, well.
No, just kidding. Campaign 3's been going for a while. We're about 7 episodes in, and we decided that we wanted to do Critical Role for our New Year's Day brunch because in Campaign 2 and apparently in Campaign 3, breakfast keeps popping up, and we wanted to do a very casual, pajama-themed New Year's brunch, and we thought Critical Role was fantastic. In keeping up with these first 7 or so episodes, we found quite a bit of food that we can pull from. And we've decided to do that. I think for all of us, Campaign 3 was just something we got instantly sucked into, instantly loved. I know I love all of the characters this season. Yes. You know, normally I can pick out and be like, okay, Jester or Bo or whatever, but everybody is just bringing a phenomenal character to the table. I will say I think Fern's my favorite, followed very closely by Fresh Cut Grass, but Laudna, Imogen, they're all fantastic. Everybody has so much to bring to the table.
I think Laudna's my favorite.
She's great. She's really great.
So, hi Marisha, fellow Louisvillian.
But yeah, no, it's been great so far. I'm loving it. Sad that Fresh Cut Grass can't eat any of the concoctions that we're going to make today.
But he's a thermos. That's the
That he is.
Fantastic.
So yeah, we took some of the stuff that we have found in these first few episodes and came up with a brunch fantastic extravaganza. We're making a few more dishes than we normally do for this episode. They're smaller dishes, as breakfast foods tend to be. We really envision this as a get your geeky friends together safely and pandemic safely. Make up these breakfast brunch recipes, put on a couple episodes, or play your own game. And these are things that you can kind of pick at throughout the day, with the exception of maybe 1 or 2 dishes. So to start us off, I came up with a breakfast sandwich that I modeled after the breakfast sandwiches that Ashton brings to the group when they meet up at the windowed wall after a certain overnight event that I'm not going to say, but if you've seen it, you know what we're talking about. He picks up some breakfast sandwiches from the area that he lives in. He says he knows a good place. The other characters aren't there, but the actors chime in and kind of give us a hint of what those breakfast sandwiches might be like. And the things that they mentioned were very few ingredients. Some fresh avocado, a runny egg, and some pepper. So I came up with the idea of an open-faced sandwich that's essentially a fancy avocado toast. That's got our avocado on it, some good crusty bread, because I imagine they always ate good crusty bread in Critical Role Land or any of like Fantasy Land. I don't think they're eating like Wonder Bread out there. Maybe they are. I also don't see this Wonder Bread. Your product is fine. But so I came up with good crusty bread, an avocado spread. I wanted to add some sort of protein because I think if you're adventuring all day, you need some protein. So I came up with link chorizo. I thought that seemed really good. And then a sunny side egg to top it off. And then a variety of toppings. We have, in the campaign, you've got like 8 different characters. Not everybody's going to want the same thing. At your brunch party, not everybody's going to want the same thing. So come up with some toppings, one of which is peppers to get that last element, the pepper, in there.
It's like a avocado toast buffet.
Essentially, yeah.
Looking forward to that. Also, good crusty bread could be a relative of fresh grass. Just saying.
It could, yeah, probably. Good crusty bread smells good. So, like oatmeal and things that we can't say on the street.
All right. Up next, we're going to do a quiche. Quiche is brunch. That's what everybody has for brunch. And this is going to be Zhudanna's quiche. It's based on the first episode of Campaign 3 when Imogene and Laudna go shopping. They get eggs, they get leeks, they get an F-ton of basket of food. So
F-ton basket.
That's what we're going to do. So we're going to do a caramelized leek quiche with goat cheese because I would put goat cheese in everything.
Me too.
And some cremini mushrooms just to add some flavor.
Sounds fantastic.
And I
can't wait to eat it.
I hope it turns out. Pie crusts are hard, but we'll do this together.
So, drinks-wise, I'm going with, again, the mocktail and cocktail pairing. So, what do you think of when you think brunch? You think mimosas. Mm-hmm. We're not doing mimosas.
Okay.
However, we are doing... we are doing a very citrusy, effervescent drink for the mocktail. It is going to be tea-based, because I know Laudna's a huge fan of tea. So, I'm really excited about that. Hopefully it turns out well, and there's no... meddling with it that messes it up.
Interesting.
Yeah. Secondly, this next cocktail has no nutritional value at all.
It's what you need for a New Year's Day brunch.
Yeah. Nobody's trying to... You can start your New Year's resolutions tomorrow.
It is going to be my take on Glühwein, but with crushed Werthers integrated into it.
Hashtag spoiler free.
So Liam's anti-Werthers. We're anti-Werthers as well.
I thought we were pro-Werthers. We're going to win Werthers back for Critical Role.
Either way, be prepared to eat a lot of old man pocket candy.
Cool.
Nice.
I hope that pocket candy was pickpocketed from various people, Fern style.
Fern, yes.
Yeah.
Just stuff it in a pocket.
So the next thing that we're going to make is the Weary Way Tavern's breakfast stew. This is something that
I thought we were doing the fruit stew.
We're not doing the fruit stew. No,
maybe
sorry.
Another day.
Maybe another day, but not today. We are doing an actual breakfasty filling stew based on the stew that the group ate at the Weary Way Tavern. They noted that the stew was full of lentils, and it was a little unusual to have a stew for breakfast, but everybody noted it was really good. So what I decided to do with that, I started racking my brain thinking, how do you make a breakfast stew? And something that came to mind is a dish that I love, shakshuka. And so I came up with an idea, and that's a tomato-based, simmery, it's not fully a stew, but it's like a simmery, thick sauce that you poach eggs in. Ooh. It's a delicious breakfast recipe, I think. I thought, take that and turn that into our breakfast stew. So I'm going to add some lentils, some spices, and really come up with a nice, hearty, breakfasty, eggy dish that hopefully is somewhat similar to what they were eating there in the Weary Way Tavern, if not better.
I've never had lentils for breakfast. I'm looking forward to that.
I think it'll be fun if it turns out. And so for our last segment, we are making pastries. So we're not doing the dessert segment because it's brunch and everything's got a little bit of sweet and savory, so a dessert just seemed a little too much. We're doing pastries two ways. Nora's doing our savory pastry.
Pocket bacon!
Of course, pocket bacon!
For anybody who has watched any Critical Role, pocket bacon is very common, a common trope amongst the fandom. It started in Campaign 2 with Beauregard, always had pocket bacon. Bacon in a pocket. So we're going to do the puff pastry. We're going to wrap the bacon in some asparagus, so we just get a little bit of vegetables today, and then some cheese, and we're going to bake it. I'm going to try to make it look like a pocket. It should be a good time.
That is going to be so much fun, and so much more appetizing than eating bacon out of a literal pocket.
Yeah, that, you know.
For our sweet pastry, I am going to try to replicate one of the Shadow Baker's pastries. I'm going to try to make the pastry that he makes for Laudna that's described as being kind of like a cinnamon roll, but is blackberry and citrusy, covered with this weird purple icing with bits of orange in it. So what I've come up with is a sweet roll filled with blackberries, little orange in the dough of that sweet roll, and then an icing that I'm going to make with a little artificial color just to give it that unnatural purple, because that's what was specifically mentioned. And then little chopped up bits of candied orange for the orange flecks.
Yes, please.
Not quite sure that I'll be up there with the Shadow Baker, but hopefully it'll be tasty.
It sounds amazing.
So yeah.
Let's do it.
Without further ado, let's roll initiative. Who's cooking first?
Roll initiative.
All right. Ooh. Just gonna mix it up.
I got a 13.
That would be a 5.
I got a 1.
Oh! That one! You have to be the ingredient bringer for the rest of the day.
I am the gopher now.
You're the gopher. All right, so with that, we're going to jump right in and get started with our Critical Role Pajama Brunch. Okay, so now we are going to make what we are calling Ashton's breakfast sandwiches, and to do that, it's super simple, and we're giving you the option to really customize your sandwich as we think anybody would want to do, and probably the characters had the opportunity to do. So, few simple ingredients here. First off, you want a nice bread, whatever kind you like best. Obviously, it's your toast, so don't get some kind of bread you don't like. We really like sourdough, so that's what we have here. You're going to need about 4 eggs. This will make 4 servings of this. 4 links of chorizo. As you can see, we've got the link kind of chorizo. There's also like ground, like you can get, and that'll work, but we really want the texture of the link, so if you can find that, that's what we recommend. 2 avocados, we've got the seeds removed, we've got the peels taken off of them, and then to top everything off, we're going to have just some little garnishes of your choice. We've got some green olives here. I've got some peppadew peppers. These are little sweet peppers. They're South African in origin. They've got like a tangy sweet taste to them, not a lot of spice. I think they're a great addition to this. And then just a couple different kinds of hot sauce. When we mash our avocados to be the spread for the base of our sandwich, we're going to mix in some lemon juice, about a teaspoon. And we're going to mix in some salt and pepper, and that'll help keep our avocados tangy and fresh so they don't turn into brown mush. So the first step is just to make that avocado mash. So what we're going to do is pop those avocados into a bowl. We're going to add our salt, our lemon juice, and just a little bit of pepper, a couple of turns on a pepper grinder if you have one, or just a pinch if you're just using ground pepper. And then we're going to take a little mashing tool or a back of a spoon, whatever you have, and just kind of mash this all together into one nice homogeneous mixture. So you'll know you're about done when it's coming together. You can see little specks of pepper throughout, and there's a little chunks of avocado left. That gives it a heartier mouthfeel but not giant pieces to where it's just clumped up in 2 or 3 pieces. So, lots of individual steps for this. So you're going to set this aside. I recommend covering it up with a piece of plastic film and setting it in the fridge. We're going to brown these chorizo just to get a nice sear on them. We're going to toast our toast. I like to do that under a broiler. You can do it in a toaster. You can do it over a campfire, whatever you like to get your toast the way you like. And then we're going to make a sunny side up egg. I'm going to do all of that over at the stove, walk you through each individual step except toasting your toast. I hope you know how to do that. And then we'll come back, put it all together, and eat up.
For the chorizo, just place your sliced chorizo links in a pan over medium heat for about 5 minutes. Flip them halfway through and make sure each side is nice and brown. To get that perfect runny egg, crack your egg into a pan heated over low heat. Cover and cook for about 2.5 minutes until the whites are set but the yolk is still runny. Don't lift that cover while the egg is cooking.
Okay, so we've let all of our individual parts of our breakfast sandwich cook, and now we're ready to put it together and turn it into a sandwich. We are preferring an open-faced sandwich, so more like a toast, but you can definitely just pop another piece of bread on there if you want a traditional sandwich. So, first thing we're going to do is we're going to take the avocado mash that we made, and we're just going to spread some of it on a piece of toast. I like a good thick layer of avocado on there. You really want to taste it. So I say spread it on there nice and heavy. And then, not quite yet, then we're going to top with our chorizo. And the reason I say not quite yet is because we want that runny yolk to really like ooze down over the sausage, into the avocado, into the bread. We want it to kind of sit on top of everything. So we're going to take our chorizo and now our runny egg, please. A little extra flair for the others. And so now we just top with the garnishes of our choice. I like the peppadew peppers, so I'm going to put some of these on here. Just kind of scatter them around wherever. A little bit of cilantro, I think, is a good addition. And then a few dashes of hot sauce. I like using Cholula, especially the garlic one. I think the smoky version of Tabasco works really well on this. Whatever you like. You might not like hot stuff at all, and you might not want to put any. So, the great thing about this, if you're having a brunch party, is everybody can kind of mix and match and make their own breakfast sandwich with their own toppings. So we're going to plate ours up and come back and see how they taste. Okay, so there we have it, Ashton's breakfast sandwiches. Let's dig in. BonAppeGeek?
BonAppeGeek. I'm ready to pick a fight over this. Looks fantastic.
So good. I don't know that I'd pick a fight over it. We don't have a healer, but, you know.
We have fresh cut grass.
He's not ours.
But we could steal him.
We'll give it a try. We're just going to eat my sandwich for now.
All right, friends, we are back. We are here to make Zhudanna's quiche crust. That is a lot to say. So what we have is 1.5 cups of all-purpose flour, 1 stick of cold unsalted butter cut into small squares. We're going to use 1 teaspoon of salt and a half cup of ice water. This is just really cold water. So first thing, we're going to add the flour to our food processor. Just add it all in there. And then 1 teaspoon of salt goes in. Oops, some for the counter. So we're just going to pulse this just for a couple seconds. That's it. Now we're going to take this off again. And we're going to add our butter. Our cold butter, unsalted, cut into little squares. Get that all around. And we're going to pulse this for about 15 seconds. It's going to look like little pieces of cornmeal. Just has little tiny balls. Let's see. Fingers crossed this is on. All right. Just keep an eye on it. Since the butter is nice and cold, that's what's going to help it to form a little meal-like consistency. And think that's it. I don't know if you could see, but it's just got little tiny clumps of butter all throughout. So now while it is running, we're going to slowly add in your ice water. Put that back on. Turn that on low. Ah! I'm okay. Pull it out first. Slowly. This is at 9 inches. Okay. Oh, you hear it working? And now we just watch, and we want it to start forming a ball. Start like coming together. It's going to take just a little bit. You can see it's starting, and you can hear it. It gets a little louder. Oh, I think we're almost there. Doesn't take long, and that's it. See, it just comes together. Just like that. Carefully remove it. You don't want anybody cutting themselves like me. Just dump it out. And what we're going to do now is we're going to, don't work it too much. We're going to form a disc. And we're going to wrap that in plastic wrap and sit it in the freezer if you don't have a lot of time. It sits in the freezer for about an hour. If you have time, you can do this overnight and sit it in your fridge for either overnight or 1 to 2 hours. We just want it to chill. So I'm going to wrap this, get it in the freezer, and come back and start making the crust into the pan. Okay, we are back. We are still working on our quiche crust. That's hard to say. So I've taken it out of the freezer, I let it sit for a few minutes, and I started rolling it out. Now I'm going to use a 9-inch pie plate. You could use one of those quiche pans that has the removable bottom. But this will work just fine. So you want to make your dough circle just a little bit bigger than your pie plate. This is 9 inches, so I'm just going to go just a little bit past. It does not have to be perfect because we're going to put it in our plate and then work on the little flutes. So don't worry about it. If it starts, see how that's ripped away a little bit? Just pat it together and roll it out again. Going to be fine. All right, I think that will just about do it, except there's a couple more. Now you very carefully pick up your dough, very carefully, and move. Woo! Lay it in there. You just want to gently press it in, and this one is already kind of fluted, so just press it. It's going to be filled with yummy toppings, so it doesn't, if it has a little bit nick in it, it's fine. Make sure it lays flat, and then we're just going to trim the edges. Okay, so I got the crust into your dough into the pan, and I kind of cleaned up the edges. It still looks a little rustic. I feel like Zhudanna's, her end and her food is going to be a little rustic too. So we're just gonna, I just pinched the sides, trimmed off the excess. Sorry. And now what we're going to do is we're going to prick it with a fork. It's on the very bottom. This helps prevent it to puff up when it's cooking. It's all over. And now we are going to chill it in the fridge for about 30 minutes. Okay, this has been chilled for 30 minutes, and now we are ready to prep it for the oven. So we are going to cover it with a piece of parchment paper. You want it to hang over the edge too, because that will help your the edges not too brown, because that is thinner up there, so it'll brown faster. And we're going to fill it with these cute little pie weights. You can use beans if you have that, some dried beans. This will help. It helps the crust bake evenly. Something about a soggy bottom. Yeah, avoid those. Just spread it out. Now we are going to put this in a 350-degree oven for about 25 minutes. We're going to remove the little beans and paper, bake it for another 12 minutes, and then we're going to let it cool and move on to the filling. Okay, our pie crust is in the oven, and we're going to cross our fingers that it's doing what it needs to do. While it's doing its thing, we're going to get the filling ready, and here are the ingredients. We've got 3 leeks. Now with leeks, you want to cut off the very bottom with the little roots and all the dark green part on top. Then slice it down the middle and give it a good rinse because there's a lot of dirt in here. And just slice it up. Next we have our mushrooms. We have about 8 ounces, 1 container of sliced cremini mushrooms. You can use whatever you have, whatever you like. We also have 2 teaspoons of thyme, 4 eggs, 2 tablespoons of butter, a 1/4 cup of milk, and 3/4 cup of heavy cream, and our goat cheese. This is herb goat cheese, but really whatever you want. And salt and pepper, and 1 tablespoon of olive oil to cook it all. We're going to gather all this up and head over to the stove.
To a very hot pan, add 1 tablespoon of olive oil, then add your leeks, salt, and pepper. Cook that down for about 12 to 15 minutes to make it nice, soft, and caramelized. Add your 2 tablespoons of butter, mushrooms, and thyme. Cook that for additional 8 to 9 minutes. You just want to make sure everything is nice and soft, and then we're going to add that to the bottom of the crust.
Okay, we are at our last step now before it goes into the oven. We've got our finished pie crust. It's cooled some, definitely look rustic. That's okay, it's gonna be delicious. Our cooked leeks and mushroom mixture, we're letting that cool for just a few minutes. And now we're gonna mix up our eggs. Just dump that in a bigger bowl, so you don't get it everywhere. And the milk and heavy cream. We're also gonna add a little bit of salt and pepper. A lot of pepper. And give that a good mix with your fork. Break up the eggs. You know how to do this, just like you're making scrambled eggs. Except with heavy cream, because it's New Year's. Alright. You just want to make sure all the eggs are broken up and it turns into this beautiful yellow mixture. Okay, now what we're going to do is assemble our quiche. We've got our mixture that's going to go on the very bottom. Oh my goodness. And then we're going to I'm going to just flatten that out a little bit. Pour our egg mixture with some assistance. Okay. Got a little bit of runniness. It's fine. It'll be fine. Now we're just going to dot the top with our goat cheese. Now the recipe calls for 3 ounces. This is 4 ounces. I won't tell if you won't. It's New Year's Day. Just dot that all over. Crumple it up. See, it did spill over a little bit. It's going to be fine. I'm going to put that in the oven again. It's going to set, so it'll bake down just a little bit. Alright, I'm going to finish just crumbling up my goat cheese here, and then we're going to pop it back in the oven at 350 for about 40 minutes until it looks golden on top, and then we'll come back to eat. Okay, we are back for the best part. We're going to taste the quiche. It looks delicious. I let it cool for just a little bit. Put it on some fancy plates, and here we go.
Let's do this.
BonAppeGeek.
BonAppeGeek.
So good. The goat cheese.
That goat cheese really shines through. Okay,
Goat cheese
every
happy
quiche
dance.
should have goat cheese in it. This is so good.
The leeks are so good. I'm just going to try a little bit of the crust.
Zhudanna, if you didn't make this with your groceries, you've missed out. This was your loss.
Ooh, so good.
Smiley day, friends. This morning we're going to start with a mocktail that's fairly simple. It's just really just fresh cut grass. No, actually it's limeade. So I took some lime juice, I mixed it with water and sugar, and that is what I'm sipping this morning to rehydrate. So, BonAppeGeek.
No.
What? Laudna, what are you doing?
This drink is Laudna's
No,
tea.
you-
Everyone knows mornings are for tea.
Keep your Eldritch stuff away.
Lost.
Now what have you done?
We've made Laudna's tea.
It's blue.
Yes.
Or pink. It's turning pink.
It's
Have
magic.
you poisoned this?
No.
The more I stir it, the pinker it turns.
It's magic.
You keep saying that.
Yes.
It is magical. And when I come back, I will show you guys how to make it. Hi, welcome back. So what I'm going to show you now is the actual mocktail. So what we're going to do is basically make a limeade here with a third of a cup lime juice, 2 tablespoons of sugar, and that's it. So I'll just pour the sugar into our glass, the lime juice into that. For the tea, this is where you get the fun color change. It's a type of tea called dried butterfly pea flower. You add that to any kind of acid and it changes the liquid that's in this from blue to pink. So basically what I do is I brew that as a tea. So I take about a tablespoon of these dried blue flowers, put them in a kettle, and then I add some mint tea. So the finished product is going to be more like a mojito mocktail version. And then I just add some freshly boiled water out of a kettle. So as you watch this steep, you will see the color of the tea actually changing from clear to blue. When I pour this into the limeade, it is going to change to pink. Alright, so as this steeps, I'll talk about this a little bit. This butterfly pea flower I got from Amazon. You can find it at Whole Foods or other those fancier grocery stores. From what I can tell, and I don't have the best palate, there's not much flavor to it. That's why I'm mixing it with a mint tea. You can mix it with whatever tea you want. The cool thing is, though, is once it hits acid, that's when it changes color. So the longer you let this steep, the bluer it's going to get. The more flowers you add, the bluer it will get. If you add too many, that blue will completely overwhelm whatever acid you mix it with, and you won't get as good of a color change. So I've let this steep for about 5 minutes at this point. I like to pick the basket up a little bit and shake some more of that liquid out just so I get more blue. As you can see, we got just some lime juice and sugar here, and then I'm just going to pour that in, and that should change color from the blue in here to pink in the glass. Now what you saw Laudna do was drop an ice cube I made with this tea into a glass of limeade that I already made. We have a silicone mold that is a D20. So you probably couldn't see it close up in the shot, but that's what we used, was a D20 ice cube made out of this tea. So if you do want to do that, you gotta do it ahead of time, because you're only going to do one at a time. So make this tea up, pour it in your mold, let it sit for about an hour or so, pull it out, start the process over again, and you're going to do this 5 or 6 times depending on the size of your party. Or you just buy a bunch of these at once. But yeah, that is Laudna's tea. BonAppeGeek.
Hey friends, so now we're ready to get started with Weary Way Tavern's breakfast stew. We're going to make this in 2 steps. We're going to make a topping, and then we're going to make the main stew. And we're going to make that in 2 steps so that your topping stays light and fresh and gives some texture on top. If we mix it all together as one big stew, then it kind of all turns to mush. So we're going to start out with our topping. We want to do that first. That way everything has time to kind of mesh together and we get all those flavors really bonding with each other. So to make our topping, we're going to start out with about 6 small tomatoes, seeded and chopped. You really want to make sure that you get your tomatoes seeded, because if you don't, that's where all the wet, sloppy stuff is in a tomato. And wet and sloppy may have been you last night for New Year's Eve. It may have been our adventurers at the end of their adventure, but it's not what we want in our breakfast stew. We don't want to start out wet and sloppy. So chop and seed those tomatoes. If you're using bigger tomatoes, if you can't find the small ones, and by small I don't mean like little cherry or grape tomatoes. If you do 6 of those, you're going to have like nothing. But just smaller tomatoes. If you're using larger ones, just scale it back. Otherwise, your ratio of tomato to other ingredients is going to be off. So we'll dump these in our bowl. Then we're going to add to that 1 cucumber that we've peeled and chopped. I used an English cucumber. I think those have a really great flavor, but it really doesn't matter too much. So we're going to put those in together. We'll give them a good stir just to get those nice and mixed up before we add our other ingredients. And then we'll add in 1 red bell pepper, chopped and seeded. I like using the red bell pepper here because it's got a little bit of a sweet flavor, but it's not the end of the world if you don't have a red bell pepper, if you wanted to use a different color. Stir that in. And then we'll add 1 red onion that we've chopped, pretty finely chopped, just so we're not biting into big bites of onion, giving that bite that we don't want. We just want a little bit of onion there. We'll stir that in, and that's all of our base ingredients for the topping. Now we're going to add a few herbs and then kind of our dressing, if you will. So we've got about 3 tablespoons of fresh parsley that we've chopped. I've chopped it kind of large, as you can see. I like having the bigger flakes of parsley in there. And about 3 tablespoons of chives chopped. These are chopped a little finer. Mix those in. The better we get it mixed, the better it's going to be. This makes quite a bit of topping, as you can see. I like to serve a good dollop of topping on pretty much every serving of this stew. It also sometimes has some left over, even if you do that, and that's fine. It makes a good salad to eat on its own. So the last thing we're going to add here is 1.5 tablespoons of lemon juice. You can use fresh squeezed if you want, but I just use this straight from a bottle. It works just as well. And about 3 tablespoons of olive oil. So we'll just drizzle that in, give it one last good stir just to make sure that lemon juice and olive oil really touches all the parts of this salad. And then we're just going to set it aside until our stew is done cooking, and we'll just add it to the top. So we're going to set that aside, and now we'll start to talk about the main base of the stew and what we need to do for that. Now obviously, because it's a tomato in the way, because it's a stew, we're going to make it on the stove, but I want to walk you through all the ingredients while we're over here. So what you're going to need to make the main base of this stew is about 3 cups of tomato passata, and I'm going to show you what that is. It's a word that probably you're not that familiar with, but tomato passata is really just a fancy word for a strained tomato. Sometimes it's sold as strained tomatoes. Sometimes it will say Italian passata on it. I got this at Whole Foods. You can find it at places like that. You can find it at Italian markets. But it's basically just strained tomatoes. You're also going to use canned lentils. We've got 2 cans of those. We don't drain them off before we add them to the stew. You want all of the juice that comes in the cans there with them. You're going to have about 3 cloves of garlic, all minced up or crushed, whichever you prefer. We've got another red bell pepper, seeded and chopped again. We've got a whole red onion that we're going to use here, chopped pretty finely, not quite as finely as we did for our topping. Then we're going to add in our seasoning. So we're going to start with salt. We're going to use 3/4 teaspoon of salt. We're going to use about 1 1/4 teaspoons of smoked paprika. If you don't like the smoky flavor, you can use regular, but I think the smokiness really brings it something extra. We're going to use about 1 1/4 teaspoons of cumin, and then about 2 or 3 teaspoons of red pepper flake. This really all depends on how spicy you like your food. Red pepper is relatively mild. You can add a few more tablespoons of it if you want a nice spicy stew. You can even switch it up and add like ghost pepper flake or habanero flake if you really like spicy stuff. If you don't like it very spicy, scale it back. Totally your choice. We think about 2 tablespoons is just enough to give it a good spicy flair without it being too hot for those people that don't like spicy food at all. But play around with it, see what you like. Going to need some olive oil, usually about a tablespoon, just to get things all nice and greasy in the pan to saute our onions and peppers. Eggs, we recommend 6 to 8. This is all preference as well. This makes quite a bit of stew. So I usually like to use 8 eggs with this, but it's kind of however much tomatoey, lentil-y stew you want to egg, that's your preference. And then finally for serving, we're going to use naan or pita bread. We can just kind of set that to the side. That doesn't really get used over at the stove. So what we're going to do is move over to the stovetop now and start putting some heat under these ingredients and get that stew simmering. I'll see you over there to walk you through it.
Heat your olive oil in a large pan over medium heat. Add the garlic and saute until it's golden and smells garlicky. Add the onion and saute until it's translucent, about 3 minutes. Now add in the pepper and the red pepper flake and cook for another 2 minutes. Turn the heat down to low, add in your spices, and give it a quick stir. Now add in the tomato passata, salt, and lentils. Gently stir and then kick the heat back up to medium-low so the mixture begins to simmer. When it's simmering, add your eggs in one at a time, leaving space between each egg. Now cover, cook for 5 to 6 minutes until the eggs are fully cooked. The egg white should be opaque and the yolk soft, gooey, and
So
jiggly.
now that we have cooked our stew, we're ready to plate it and serve it. If you are gathering with a close group of friends or family, what I like to do is serve it right in the pan that we cook it with, and everybody just kind of dips in using their bread. That's the way I'm going to present it here today, but if you aren't comfortable with that, if it's a bigger group, absolutely scoop it out into a bowl. Just make sure everybody gets a little bit of egg. So what I'm going to do is take some of this bread that we've cut and just kind of arrange it nicely. You know, just whatever you think looks good. Kind of around our pan here. Let's make a nice little presentation. Then we're going to take the topping that we made before, and we're just going to scoop some of it out and put it in the center of our pan. What we want is to be able to mix this in when you get a bite of the stew. But like I said earlier, we didn't want to cook it in there so that it didn't get all mushy, but we'll just scoop that in as much as you want. I think the fresh cold veggies on top really brings something to the dish, so I really like to pile them in here. And then we're just going to top it off with a few more sprigs of our fresh parsley. So we'll just put that on, and that's our plating. That's how I like to serve this. It's really a kind of a share meal where you all just kind of dig in together. And so we're going to finish plating this up, get rid of all of the things that we don't need, and we'll be back to taste. So here we are, Weary Way Tavern's famous breakfast stew. Let's dig in.
I'm excited.
You know, if Imogen recommends it, it's got to be good.
That passata is great. Is there something you could use besides passata?
You really want the passata to get the right consistency. You could use tomato sauce, but you'd want to thin it down a bit.
Gotcha. Good.
Yeah, well, BonAppeGeek.
BonAppeGeek. Hello, and welcome to the cocktail portion of the show, where we will be making Bertrand's hot chocolate. This is my take on the German Glühwein mixed with chocolate. So what we're going to be using is a full bottle of wine, red wine, and I went with a Pinot Noir. We're going to be using 500 grams of dark chocolate and then 200 grams of cocoa powder. Now, what I need to say is this is unsweetened cocoa powder. It's not the same as chocolate milk mix or hot chocolate mix. If you use that stuff, it's going to have a lot of additives and sugars and emulsifiers and all kinds of stuff that's going to change the flavor. It's okay to use it, but it's not going to be the same. Also, we're going to be using some cinnamon sticks, star anise, and then some cloves. This is a batched drink, so don't think you're going to finish this on your own, and if you do, please be responsible. For the rim, we are actually using Werther's Originals, Bertrand's favorite candy. To get the rim, what we're going to do is use some caramel sauce to make the rim sticky, and then we're going to treat these caramels like Sam feels about the caramels, or Matt Mercer himself. We're going to bash them like crazy. What I like to do is wrap it in a towel, and then bash it within the towel, and then you have that crumminess that you can put on the edge of your mug or whatever serving glass you decide to use. So we will go to the stove. We are going to pour some water in, heat that up, combine all these ingredients, let it steep for a bit, then we will add the wine, and then you will plate that into the mug.
To make glühwein, bring water, sugar, cocoa powder, and all of your spices to a simmer in a pan. Once you've reached that state, remove it from heat and whisk the chocolate in until it is fully integrated. Once that is done, add your red wine of choice and heat until a temperature of 130 to 140. Remove and serve warm.
All right, welcome back. So we have come back from the stovetop where we have created our glühwein. We have gone Ashton on these Werthers. And what we're going to do now is rim our mug and then pour the glühwein. So I just have some caramel sauce that I'm going to drizzle over the rim of the mug. I like to hold it over the wine that we just cooked because a little bit of extra sugar in there is not going to hurt anything. So you just do that. Get a nice rim job on there. And stick it in your Werthers. So you get a nice, good coating all the way around. Take the ladle of your choice. Now I have removed all of the cloves and star anise just so that I don't choke on it as I'm drinking. So you just ladle that on in there, and there is our cocktail. Bon appetit.
Hello, we are back. We are doing our pastry two ways. We're going to start, I've got the savory side, and we're doing pocket bacon. Woo! Pocket bacon. If you watched any kind of Critical Role, you know pocket bacon is a beloved thing. So for that, we're going to need some bacon. Any kind of bacon you want. This is thick slice. It's going to be wrapped around in asparagus, so it doesn't really matter. We got our puff pastry. These are pre-cut and ready to go. If you have the time, feel free to make your own. More power to you. I do not. I'm very lazy. Then we've got our asparagus. We've just snapped those where they go and ready for the bacon. 8 ounces of Colby Jack cheese and 1 egg.
Okay, so for the other side of things, I'm going to be doing the sweet side of things. We're going to be making one of the Shadow Baker's magical concoctions, the blackberry and orange magical sweet roll that was presented to Laudna. And to do that, the first thing that we need to do is get started making our dough. This is a made-from-scratch dough, so you have got to work with yeast, you've got to let it rise, so it's a bit of a process, but it's worth it. It's actually going to be easy, and it's going to be really tasty. So the first thing that we're going to do is take some milk. We've got 3/4 cup of milk here. I'm using 2%. You can use whole. Skim might mess things up just a little bit, so try to use 2% or whole. You have heated this milk up to 115 degrees. It's really important to get it to just the right temperature. If you overheat it, you could kill the yeast. If you underheat it, then the yeast is going to be asleep and not doing its job. So take a thermometer, measure that milk out, make sure you get it to the right temperature. When you've got it at 115 degrees, you're going to take and sprinkle your sugar on top of it. So that's 1 teaspoon of granulated white sugar, and you're just going to drizzle that on top. And then you're going to take your yeast. This is regular old instant yeast that you buy at the grocery store. You've got 2 1/4 teaspoons. That's equivalent to 1 packet. If you don't want to buy the jar, 1 packet is 2 1/4 teaspoons.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
That's interesting.
same amount. And so we're just going to sprinkle that on top to where it sets on top of the milk. We're going to leave that alone for about 5 minutes and watch it start to get all foamy as the yeast starts to activate from the heat of the milk. Once that happens, we'll start mixing up our actual dough, but we'll be back in about 5 minutes.
Okay, we are ready for pocket bacon. So I've already started on our asparagus. You're just going to take your asparagus after you pop the end of the stem off. Just wrap your bacon around. You want the little tops of the trees to stick out just so it look pretty. Now we've got 2 pieces of our puff pastry. So we're going to do a little bit of cheese on the bottom. You want to put it right in the middle because we're going to try to fold this over. Just a little bit of cheese. All right, 2 pieces of asparagus. And you want just a little bit of the bacon and the asparagus to stick out the top. You kind of want to put those towards the middle as well. All right, here we go. This is where we've got to cross our fingers. We're going to fold those up, stretch it a little bit. Okay. Now I'm going to take a little paring knife, try to make it look more like a pocket. So just cut those, just cutting a little triangle kind of shape off the bottom here. You don't have to do this. This is just to make it look like a pocket. You can do whatever you want. All right, once you get that, then we're going to take a fork. It's okay, it's got egg wash on it. We're going to use that next. And I'm just going to fold this over just a little bit to help it look a little bit more even. And now we're going to take that and just make little, it's kind of like the seams of a pocket all the way around. Do that on both sides. Alright. Press down a little bit more on the top since we did fold that over. It'll puff up a little bit in the oven, so if it looks kind of wonky, it's going to be fine. All right, we've got our pockets. Now we're going to take our egg. We beat 1 egg, and we're going to use this as our little egg wash. All right, and that's it. We're going to put this in a 350 degree oven for about 20 minutes to let it puff up and the asparagus and the bacon to cook. I'm going to keep assembling my pocket bacons, and we're going to put them in the oven and come back.
Okay, we're back. Our yeast has bloomed, and that is just a fancy baking term to mean that the yeast mixed in with the sugar and the sugars from the milk, and it got all gross and looks like a swampy, goopy mess. That means it's doing its job. So we are now ready to make the actual dough. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our mixer with the dough hook attachment, and we're going to add 3 cups of all-purpose flour. All-purpose flour is important here because if you use self-rising flour and you use yeast, your sweet rolls are going to like crazy. They're going to be a hot mess. You're not going to have room for filling, so use that all-purpose flour. We're also going to add a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. We're going to add a 1/4 cup of sugar, regular granulated white sugar. 1 teaspoon of orange juice. This is just going to impart some of that citrusy flavor that was described in the show. Feel free to play around with this. I'm using high pulp squeezed orange juice. You can, whatever you like, honestly. You can use that no pulp stuff. You can use Sunny Delight. You can use Tang. All of it's just going to give a little different orange flavor, and it's however you want your pastry to taste. And then we're going to use the zest of 1 orange. That is, I have taken this off using a fine grater. You can use a zesting tool. It'll take a little bit longer. So we're just going to dump all that in. And then we're going to add in a 1/4 cup of melted butter. So fresh from the microwave, we'll add our butter. Make sure it is completely melted. Unlike when you're making a cake or cookies, we want it liquidy. So we'll pour that in and just get it started mixing together. We're going to mix it fairly low so our flour doesn't poof up in our face. We're just going to start to bring this together, and then we're going to add in the yeast and milk mixture. Alright, we've got this starting to come together. You can see clumps. You can see the orange dispersed throughout. So now we're going to add our yeast mixture. And then we're going to add 2 eggs. Just pop those in there. We'll start out slow and slow again to incorporate those, and then we're going to kick our, our speed up to medium, and just get it mixing until it comes together in one clumpy dough ball. Okay, so after a few minutes of kneading, our dough has come together into pretty much one big ball. So if you're sticking together, holding together pretty well, it can be a little bit sticky. That's fine. You've got it where you want it. So we're going to pop that back in the bowl. We're going to cover it with just a little bit of plastic wrap or a dish towel, and we're going to let it prove for an hour. Now, proving is just a fancy baking term that means letting the dough rise. The most important thing about a prove is making sure you have it in the right environment for the yeast to get its job done. Some ovens have a prove setting, and if that's the case, pop that on, stick this in there, set your timer for an hour, and you're good. If you don't, you want to find a warm place in your house to let this rise. So a lot of people will put it like near a stove, but not with a burner on, maybe like after a burner's been on for a little bit. If your house is nice and warm anyway, it'll be fine. If you're like me and you keep your house cold, just find a warmer spot to let this rise. Don't put it in direct heat. Again, you'll kill your yeast. So we're going to let this do its job. We're going to let it raise up, and we'll come back in about an hour to roll these up and make our filling. So when your dough is almost risen, when you're coming up on the end of your hour, you're going to make your filling, because the next step is to roll out the dough and fill it. Filling is so easy for this. You have a 1/2 cup of sugar, regular granulated sugar. You have the zest of 1 orange. You're going to dump them into a bowl together. You're going to mix it all around so that you've got orange interspersed with sugar, and this is what we're going to spread down for the base of the filling before we add our fruit. Just gives it a good, sweet, citrusy kick. Alright, so our dough has risen, and as you can see, it is a big old fluffy boy at this point. Should be about twice the size as it was when you put it in. We are ready to roll it out and start shaping this into a pastry. So we're going to roll up our sleeves and dump it out onto, you can either do just flour your counter, you can use a silicone baking mat, or you can use some parchment paper, just something between the surface and your dough so it doesn't get all sticky and gross. So we're going to flop that out. I like using these baking mats because they usually come with measurements, and I can get a good idea for if I've rolled this out enough or not. So we're just going to get all of this dough out of here. Don't leave any behind in the bowl, because that's tasty, tasty treat that we are just neglecting if we do. We're going to place that bowl out of the way. We're going to flip it a couple of times, and then we're just going to start rolling it out before we fill it. So just plop it square in the middle if you're using a baking mat. Grab your rolling pin. Back in the day when I didn't have a rolling pin, I used to use a pint glass for this. It'll get the job done if you don't have a rolling pin. What we want to do is roll this out into a nice large rectangle or roughly rectangle shape. You want to go with about 10 inches on the short side by about 15 to 20 inches on the long side. The longer and wider you roll this out, the more rolls you'll get, but the less bread you'll have in each individual roll. If you get it too thin, if you said, I want to make a gajillion rolls and not add any stuff to my recipe, cheater mode activated, that's nice, except you're going to end up with basically like rolls that have the consistency of like crunchy pie crust. You're going to have rolled it out so thin. So it doesn't work, unfortunately. You can't just roll it out to make more. So it doesn't have to be perfect. Once we get these all rolled up, we're going to cut them anyway. So as you can see, mine's a little misshapen. We definitely don't have a perfect rectangle here. Now we don't have any rectangle because I just messed it up. But it's not perfect, and that's perfectly fine. What matters is that we get it all rolled out. More than anything, you want the thickness of the dough to be relatively even. That's going to affect your bake more than whether or not your edges are straight. Alright, so when you get it rolled out to about the size that you are going for, we're not quite there, but we're pretty close, we're going to start adding some filling. So the first thing that we're going to add is our melted butter. We've got another 1/4 cup of butter that we melted, and we're just going to spread that all along the dough. That's going to give our dough a nice buttery flavor. It's also going to give this filling a little bit of grip to actually stick to the dough. So I'm using a pastry brush and my melted butter. You can just dump it on and use your hands too. It doesn't really matter. And we just want to spread it all over. You don't want one side to be more buttery than the other. Again, for flavor reasons and for making your filling stick. If you remember when we mixed up the filling, it was mostly just orange zest and sugar. So we need some liquid here to get this to all come together, and that's what our butter does. Okay, so we're nice and glossy. We've got butter spread pretty much everywhere here. And we're going to add our filling. So the first part that we're going to add is this orange zest and sugar mixture that we made. And we're just going to sprinkle that around, just kind of all over, kind of like you would if you're topping a pizza. Just little handfuls here and there. Spread it out. You want it very even. Otherwise, you're going to have one side of your dough that's nice and sweet and orangey, and one side that's not. And when that's all rolled up, that's going to make for some really weird textures if you have a lot of filling in one area and not so much in another. So we've got that. That's our base for our filling. Now we want to add our blackberries. So we've got about 2 cups of blackberries here. What I have done is taken a masher and just started to mash some of these up. You don't want them all to be completely blackberry puree, but you do want a fair amount of them kind of goopy and mushed up. Couple of reasons for that. One is, again, it'll create a more gooey filling, which most people like. The other is it'll make it a little more even when we're rolling if we don't have big old giant blackberries in there. So just get it, some bigger pieces, some smaller, but a lot of goop. And now we're just going to spread that over top of everything. So I'm just kind of dumping at this point, and then I'm going to go back over with that pastry brush, or you can use your hands again, and just kind of spread it all out nice and even. Just like with the orange mix, you don't want all the blackberry concentrated on one side. You want to really spread it out and make it even. And see, this is where it's important that we mash some of them. As you can see, we've got some of the bigger chunks. If we didn't do that, we just have pockets of berry here and there. But because we mashed it, there should be a little bit of blackberry flavor in pretty much every bite. Get it back on the pastry. Doesn't do anybody any good if our filling is on the baking mat or the counter. You don't want to go all the way to the edge, but you want to go pretty close. And so once you've got your filling mixture distributed in a way you like, here comes the fun part or the hard part, depending on your sense of adventure. We're going to roll this up. So we're going to take one of the short ends and we're just going to start rolling it in on itself, just making a little spiral. We want to keep it as tight as possible. So as we're rolling, stuff that filling in, roll it nice and tight. And this is one reason you don't want to go all the way to the edge with your filling. Because if you do, when you start rolling, it's just going to puke it all out onto your counter. It's going to be a big mess, and your rolls are not going to be very flavorful. So we've got it all rolled up now. I like to put seam side down, and then we will pop this in the fridge to rest for about an hour. If you're pressed for time, you can put it in the freezer to rest a little shorter. What we really want to do is get everything nice and cold so the butter re-solidifies. That way when we go to cut this into sweet rolls, our filling doesn't just puke out and not be there in our roll where we want it to be. So I'm going to pop this in the freezer for a little bit. We'll come back, cut it, bake it, and we'll be good to go. So after your dough has chilled in the fridge or freezer for a little bit, just enough to where it's not, as you can see, it was kind of oozing out before, so that it's not oozing all over the place when we go to cut it. We're ready to cut it up into those little discs that we're normally used to eating when we have a sweet roll. And you can place them in one of two pans. I like using a 9-inch round cake pan. I think that makes the cinnamon rolls kind of clump all together and it makes them nice and gooey. So I really like that. You can get, though, a prettier look out of your roll if you do them as individual rolls on like a cookie sheet or baking tray. So it's really all whatever your preference is. If you're more for that ooey gooey delicious taste and the warm gooiness, go with the cake pan. If you're more of a presentation person, go with the cookie sheet. So as far as getting them done, you want to cut them up into, you want to leave them about 1 inch to 1.5 inches in width, and you just want to start cutting along. You either want to use a relatively sharp knife or pastry cutter, or you want to do these back and forth type motions. And the reason you want to do that is if your knife isn't sharp enough or your pastry cutter isn't sharp enough and you just go like chop, 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 you're going to squish it, all the filling's going to run out, you're going to lose the pretty roll shape. But once you get them cut, you just start placing them in your pan. I always recommend that we line our pan, whether it's the cookie sheet or the cake dish, with some parchment. That just makes it so much easier to remove, especially with a dough and a filling like this, with a fruit filling that can get all sticky. So we will cut all of these up and then we're going to bake them in a 350-degree oven that we've already preheated. We're going to bake them for about 35 to 40 minutes, but there's one step that we need to do actually before that, and that is to let them rise yet another time. You can squish some of the rise out of this yeasted dough in cutting these. So what you actually want to do is let these sit 30 minutes to an hour. Just let them get kind of puffy in their pan and then pop them in that oven. Like I said, 35 to 40 minutes. You've got a little bit of a range there. You just want to watch them, let them get nice and golden, but not too brown, not too crunchy. So we'll finish cutting these up, get them risen and in the oven, and we'll come back to ice and decorate them. Okay, so while our rolls are in the oven, we can go ahead and get started on our icing. That way we're ready to ice them and serve them as soon as they come out of the oven. This icing is really simple. It's just a few ingredients that we're going to throw together in a mixer. So first up is 1 block, that's 8 ounces of cream cheese. You'll want to let it come up to room temperature. That just helps your mixer along and helps your icing come together a little faster than if you're working with cold, blocky cream cheese. We've got 1 cup of powdered sugar that we're going to add. About 2 tablespoons of orange juice, and about 1 tablespoon of orange zest. So we'll put that all in the mixer, and then we'll just get it worked together until it is smooth and looks like what you'd expect an icing for like a sweet roll or a cinnamon roll to look like. So we'll start that off on low so we don't get powdered sugar face, and then gradually increase the speed. And so once you've got it to where it's starting to come together and look like a smooth icing, it's thick but not too thick, that's really that consistency that you want, so that way it spreads over but it also kind of goos down into the sweet roll. When we've got that, we're going to add our food coloring. If you remember, these rolls from the Shadow Baker were described as having an unnatural purple coloring, so we're going with an unnatural purple coloring. We're just going to add a few drops of purple food color or food dye. Really, I like to add about 5 or 6 drops. I want them really vibrantly purple. If you're going for a paler look, add a little bit less. And you can always add a drop or two, mix it, and keep adding till you get the color that you want. So it just takes a couple of seconds just to kind of stir that all together and get it a nice consistent purple. Once you've got that, you're really done with this icing. So as you can see here, mine's a pretty bright purple. You can add as much or as little as you want. Up on the top of my beater here, you can see there's still a little bit of the white, but we want to make sure that down in the bowl, the part that you're spreading, there's no big swirls in there, or you won't get that unnatural purple icing effect that you're going for. So I'm done with mine. I'm going to set it aside for just a little bit. If your rolls are already in the oven, you can just set this aside on the counter. That way your mixture doesn't go back in the fridge and start to solidify again and become too clumpy to really spread. If you haven't put your rolls in the oven yet and you're making this in advance, do put it back in the fridge because cream cheese shouldn't sit out on the counter forever. Alright, so we're going to finish baking up and then we will ice these and get them decorated and get ready to eat. Okay, so our rolls are done baking. We've pulled them out of the cake pan using that parchment paper, made it really easy to do. And so the last thing to do before we're ready to eat them is to put our icing on them and then decorate them with our candied orange bits. So we're just going to take our icing and you can use a spoon, you can use a spreader like this, and just kind of spread it over. Think about like when you buy cinnamon rolls at like a coffee shop or something, that icing is just kind of spread all over them. And that's what we want to do here. Just get it spread all over there so you get that weird artificial purple color on every roll, but more importantly, so you get some of this creamy orange icing goodness on every roll. So we just spread that around until we're happy with it. You can ice them as thickly as you like or as sparsely as you like. Obviously this has a lot of powdered sugar in it, so it's real sweet. So if you don't like sweet, extra sweet rolls, maybe use a little less. I like things good and sweet, so I'm putting quite a bit of icing on here. I'm pretty happy with that. I think that's got us a nice purple coating. And then if you remember, the Shadow Baker's rolls were noted to have little flecks of orange in the icing. So I've just taken some of our candied orange peel, chopped it up into little bits, and I'm just going to sprinkle those around kind of at random. Like you would if you were making a birthday cake, kind of how you would sprinkle sprinkles around. That's what I'm going to do with these little bits of candied orange peel. That'll give us an extra citrus kick, and it gives us those flecks of orange that were described when we saw the Shadow Baker. So I'm going to finish topping these off with our orange flecks, and then we're going to come back together and taste these along with our pocket bacon for our critical pastries with advantage. Okay, so there are our pastries 2 ways, or pastries with advantage. I am so excited to dig in.
Yes, look how cute the pocket bacon is.
So adorable.
Looks like an 80s jean, the Jordache jean pocket. And yours, I cannot wait to dig into that. That looks just like they described it on the show.
I hope they taste as good as they described on the show.
All right, well, let's dig in.
Let's do it. Okay, should we start with savory or sweet first?
Well, I'd like sweet first, but I haven't tasted that one yet.
Well, there you go. One sweet roll straight from the
nice.
Shadow Baker.
Look at that. It's so pretty. That was very good.
Fruity, citrusy, and I like it. Yeah. You can see why the Shadow Baker has his reputation.
Oh, that blackberry. That's so good. Yeah. All right.
All right, time to find out if pocket bacon is worth multiple campaigns of hype.
It sure looks like it. Oh, there you go.
My
It's a
own
double
pocket. Love it.
Yes to pocket bacon.
All the way. So tasty.
That ends at 20.
I think these were definite Fritz successes.
Mm-hmm.
All right, guys, that's it. We're out of initiative. Critical Role Brunch is done.
Great success.
I need a long rest
Me too. Me too.
and a health potion.
Yes.
You should have made us some health potions.
Yeah, I should have.
But yeah, no, that was fantastic. Delicious, tiring. It is New Year's Day, though, so everything's tiring on New Year's Day.
At least we're still in our pajamas.
Yeah, cooking in my pajamas was fun. I really liked that. I liked the food. I liked the food a lot.
Yeah,
so
food was
good.
great.
What'd you guys like best?
I think my favorite was the lentil stew, aka shakshuka. I'm a sucker for shakshuka. It's always good, always amazing.
It's surprisingly easy. I think when people like see it or get it in a restaurant, you think it's going to be really difficult, and it is just surprisingly easy.
Yeah, I was very impressed with it, though. It's an impressive, easy dish. That's what we like. I love the tea. That was magical. It was amazing. And how they were shaped like the D20. That was great. Loved it. My favorite dish was the blackberry cinnamon type rolls. They were great. I've never had anything like that. Blackberry with orange. Highly recommend.
There is
I'll
no
make it.
comparison to the Shadow Baker. But actually, I think there is. I actually loved Zhudanna's quiche. I think that if Zhudanna whipped up something like this for Imogen and Laudna with the groceries, they will be very pleased.
Yes.
I think I've said this like on a number of episodes now. I'm a sucker for anything goat cheese, and that being in there, it just really took it over the top for me. I loved it. The magical drink was super cool too. I did not think that was going to work when you were like, let's do a color change thing. It's like, there's no way. But here we are. It worked.
Yeah, so what's next?
So next, the very next thing we'd like to know is if you made any of this, if you had your own pajama brunch party, whether for New Year's or any time, we'd like to see it. Post it on pretty much any social media. Use hashtag BonAppeGeek, and we'll check it out. We'd love to know what you did. We'd love to know what you thought. You can also follow us on social media, and Nora's got all the details for that.
Yep, we are everywhere. We are on Twitter, Instagram, now Reddit, TikTok, Facebook, all at BonAppeGeek Show.
You can also pull all of the recipes from this episode and all of our previous recipes from our blog at BonAppeGeekShow.com, both for our socials and for our website. Please make sure you put show in there. That is our individual handle, and if you don't put show in there, who knows what you'll get.
Well, that's all linked down below. If you want to check out, we have the link to our website, all of our socials is down there. And while you're down there, if you like this episode, please consider giving a thumbs up and hit subscribe.
All right, so we will see you back in a couple of weeks. We'll be back to our normal air date of Sundays. This was just a one-off Saturday morning special. We'll be back in 2 weeks for a Final Fantasy themed episode.
Yes.
Very excited about that.
The new expansion has a lot of good food, so it's going to be a good time.
Tons of good food. Very excited.
Right, so thank you everyone, and is it Thursday yet?
Our show doesn't release on Thursday!
I want to steal his tagline.
Is it Sunday yet? It doesn't work.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll figure it out.
Bye, critters.